Hello everyone! I know you're ready to listen to me waffle about Aperture, so let's get right to it! Let's go! Cave Johnson, the man who started all of Aperture, wasn't always experimenting with the fabric of reality, or planting people into programs. He started out as just a successful entrepreneur. In 1943, he founded Aperture Fixtures, a shower curtain manufacturer. Much of Cave's early success came from this business, and with the company developing shower curtains for the US military as well as just regular people, Johnson soon was rewarded for his efforts, becoming the shower curtain salesman of 1943. Oh yeah, and a billionaire. Should probably mention that he also became a billionaire from this. Making quick use of his wealth, in 1944, Johnson bought a colossal salt mine in Upper Michigan, which went as deep as 4 kilometers underground. Here the full Aperture Fixtures facility was constructed, in the underground caverns and tunnels. See, even the old boxes are just blocks of salt. The next major step came in 1947, when Mr. Johnson decided to take a detour on his journey of developing shower curtains, and broaden his horizons to be more scientific, renaming the company to Aperture Science. Cave swiftly began experimenting with physics primarily in this new direction, and while he was infamous for his, less than orthodox approach to science, Aperture Science managed to receive an award for Best New Science Company the same year. By the 1950s, Aperture had flourished as a company. Within the Enrichment Centre, Cave was an active participant in testing the company's various products, creating pre-recorded announcements and messages to greet new visitors and testers, and to explain what they'd be doing, where they'd be going and such.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Aperture Science. Astronauts, war heroes, Olympians, you're here because we want the best. And you are it. So, who is ready to make some science?
Fit, reliable people that were optimum and ripe for testing. During this time, Johnson was assisted by his ever-loyal assistant Carolyn, who would continue to be his assistant for the next few decades. By now, Aperture was in the stages of developing the quantum tunneling device, the first rendition of what we'd know as the portal gun. Test chambers were rapidly constructed to test the device in Test Shaft 9 and others. Everything seems to be going quite good for Aperture. That is until about the 1960s, when Aperture just passed its peak, and with countless products from Aperture either being pulled from shelves for violating health and safety regulations or being stuck in the testing phase altogether, it was clear that Aperture was on its way to a steep decline. In 1961, Cave ordered that the lower areas of Test Shaft 9 were to be decommissioned and sealed off, to hide the highly unethical first experiments Aperture had been cooking up, such as turning people into mantises. In 1968, Aperture was involved in US Senate hearings regarding the very, mysterious disappearances regarding astronauts shortly after entering testing at Aperture. Later this same year, the inevitable unfortunately did happen for Cave. Aperture was officially declared bankrupt, and as a result, the company could no longer afford to employ the esteemed, perfectly fit members of society to participate in various test exercises. Instead, homeless people will be plucked off the street and offered a whopping $60 whole dollars, worth about $540 nowadays, in exchange for the disservice of being Aperture's new guinea pigs. A further $60 would be offered if people would allow Aperture to disassemble and reassemble them in the name of scientific advancement. Johnson also wasn't exactly pleased with the company's failure and bankruptcy and didn't exactly make his disdain for the homeless very secretive.
Greetings, friend. I'm Cave Johnson, CEO of Aperture Science. You might know us as a vital participant in the 1968 Senate hearings on missing astronauts, and you've most likely used one of the many products we invented, but that other people have somehow managed to steal from us. Black Mesa can eat my bankrupt...
Sir, the testing?
Right. Now you might be asking yourself, Cave, just how difficult are these tests? What was in that phone book of a contract I signed? Am I in danger? Let me answer those questions with a question. Who wants to make $60? Cash. You can also feel free to relax for up to 20 minutes in the waiting room, which is a damn sight more comfortable than the park benches most of you were sleeping on when we found you. So, welcome to Aperture. You're here because we want the best, and you're it. Nope. Couldn't keep a straight face. Anyway, don't smudge up the glass down there. In fact, why don't you just go ahead and not touch anything unless it's test related?
Johnson placed the blame on Black Mesa for Aperture's rising number of failings, claiming that ideas were being stolen directly from Aperture, but could neither find the evidence nor the support for these claims, and while Black Mesa flourished, Aperture continued sinking deeper into troubles and turmoil. Around this time is when the Borealis was constructed, an interdimensional ship that, mysteriously disappeared one day. Its dock was left empty, with just some life rings being left to show it was even there at all in the first place. By October 1976, Cave had Aperture branch out into a wider selection of guinea pigs to use in testing, ranging from orphan children to psychiatric patients to the elderly. Nobody seemed to be off limits to Johnson. He then decided to create a three-step program or plan for the future of his company. 1. The Heimlich countermaneuver. 2. The Take-A-Wish Foundation. And most importantly, 3. The Portal Project. Not really sure what the first two are, but number 3 is very important, as it gave birth to the Aperture Science handheld portal device, or just portal gun for short. Testing the Portal Project calls for construction of large test chambers and facilities, as well as the Enrichment Center, a large area of Aperture labs beneath the surface consisting of chambers and offices where the portal gun was to be optimized and tested. In the 80s, Aperture was still in immense financial turmoil, hemorrhaging money at every turn and opportunity. In a last-ditch effort in 1981, Cave purchased $70 million worth of moon rocks. From where? I'm not sure. However, they were used in the development of further movement gels and their implementation into portal testing. Only problem was that Cave was told he barely had enough cash to afford $7 worth of moon rocks, let alone $70 million. Upon the discovery that moon dust was an extraordinarily good portal conductor, Johnson immediately took action in developing conversion gel, and it turned out to be an amazing portal conductor. However, this did unfortunately come at an incredibly great cost to himself. Johnson contracted a fatal illness due to his prolonged exposure to moon dust, which slowly but steadily killed him from the lungs outward, and caused his kidneys to fail.
Conversion gel. The bean counters told me we literally could not afford to buy $7 worth of moon rocks, much less 70 million. Bought them anyway, ground them up, mixed them into a gel. And guess what? Ground up moon rocks are pure poison. I am deathly ill. Still, it turns out they're a great portal conductor.
In his further struggle for test subjects, among financial issues, Johnson ordered that employee testing was now mandatory for all employees, which dramatically raised the quality of the test subjects, but also, in turn, dramatically reduced employee retention. Essentially, every employee was dying very quickly due to fatal tests. As a result, Johnson decided to take a turn towards phasing out human in testing altogether. He continued to make announcements and messages which played over the speaker systems. However, judging by his voice, it was very clear that his health was deteriorating rapidly.
Alright, I've been thinking. When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad! I don't want your damn lemons! What am I supposed to do with these? Demand to see life's manager. Make life rue the day it thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemons. I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down.
Not only this, but his messages became less focused on the actual testing and more about his concerns and plans for the future of the company. In an attempt to cheat death and prolong his lifespan, in 1982, Cave had his top engineers start development on a computer system that could store his consciousness. However, even he knew that this wasn't a solid plan and was mostly infeasible, and so ordered that if the project were to be completed after his passing, then his assistant Carolyn was to be poured into the system in his place, much to her protests, and become his ultimate successor as CEO of Aperture.
The point is, if we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store a man's intelligence and personality on one? So I have the engineers figuring that out now. Brain mapping, artificial intelligence. We should have been working on it 30 years ago. I will say this, and I'm gonna say it on tape so everybody hears it 100 times a day. If I die before you people can pour me into a computer, I want Carolyn to run this place. Now she'll argue. She'll say she can't. She's modest like that, but you make her. Hell, put her in my computer. I don't care. All right, test's over.
Shortly after, in the same year, Johnson unfortunately succumbed to his illness while the AI technology was still in its early research phases. In 1986, Aperture gained knowledge that Black Mesa had been developing similar portal technology. In response, Aperture decided to begin construction on the first genetic lifeform and disk operating system, or GLaDOS for short, with the aim to speed up the process of the Portal project based on the AI research performed previously. In 97, GLaDOS was nearing completion, and as a failsafe, the Red Phone plan was put in place if GLaDOS was to ever become sentient, or to an extent that it was dangerous. This required an employee to sit by a red phone in the entrance hall to GLaDOS's chamber. Carolyn's memories were uploaded shortly following this, implying she died very recently before or during the process of uploading, which is a really grim thought. In 98, GLaDOS was activated for the first time. However, Carolyn's memories seemed to be repressed, and as a result, her first action was an attempt to kill every single person immediately. She was rapidly deactivated, and the same situation happened over and over and over again. So as a result, attempts were made to suppress her murderous tendencies through the creation of the personality cores. Sometime later this year, Aperture held its first annual Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, which ended in an unknown disaster. Shortly after, GLaDOS was fitted with a morality core. Eventually, GLaDOS claimed she had no more murderous tendencies or cravings to kill. Instead, her motivation and cravings were now focused directly on science and testing with consciousness. She announced her desire to perform an experiment using cats and boxes on the aforementioned Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. She claimed she only needed just a small amount of neurotoxin for her experiment, and for some godforsaken reason, she was given it, as the scientists figured nothing bad would come of it. Hint hint, foreshadowing. Years later, in presumably the early 2000s, potentially 2003, GLaDOS was activated as a part of another Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. A little girl called Shell participated here with her project of a potato battery. She'll be very important later. However, things didn't go so smoothly this year around. GLaDOS became hostile and locked down the entire facility, trapping everyone in the building before flooding it all with the deadly neurotoxin that she had previously requested. GLaDOS then essentially started her own form of purgatory, a constant testing cycle using the captive Aperture workers as her guinea pigs, the same way Cave had, but somehow even more unethical, all in a race to beat Black Mesa in the Portal race, which she lost. However, Black Mesa's technology did start an invasion of the planet, which can kind of tarnish their win a bit. Meanwhile, GLaDOS was burning through workers like there was no tomorrow, and the last surviving employee, one Doug Ratman, broke out of his testing cycle due to his paranoia and schizophrenia. His schizophrenia was so bad that his companion cube became his conscious, his only friend, his one last piece of sanity. Yet it somehow managed to help him navigate through the back corridors of Aperture and avoid any turrets GLaDOS had placed for him. Doug had developed a hunch about a test subject who he believed could make some kind of difference. Shell. See, I told you she'd be important, look! He made his way to the file room and decided to place Shell at the top of the subject list, ensuring she'd be awoken from her stasis as soon as possible, despite her file saying that she should never be tested due to her extreme stubbornness and her determination. For months, Doug snuck around behind the walls of Aperture, surviving on what little he could. Food, scraps, water and such. He only had 2 antipsychotic pills left and saved them for the day Shell would be awoken from stasis. As a result, he went completely mad. His schizophrenia took over and he went completely mad, scribbling all over the walls with murals and arrows as well as hints for Shell for when she inevitably awoke. He became more and more dependent on his companion cube. It became his source of advice and his only source of logic. In 2010, Shell finally awoke and the events of the first Portal game take place. Shell is guided through the facility by GLaDOS, utilising the now complete Portal device. The facility is in visible disrepair and neglect, the walls are filthy, the gaps are full of murky, disgusting water. GLaDOS frequently glitches on the intercom system. Shell also later finds Doug's desperate ramblings behind the wall panels left open, while Doug also watches from afar, finally sane after taking his pills that he'd been saving. After completing her testing, Shell is met with a blazing incinerator, rather than the cake that she'd been promised and craving from the very beginning of the game. She frantically escapes through the decaying maintenance halls in an attempt to escape, dodging turret ambushes along the way until she finally ends up in GLaDOS's chamber. Here, Shell destroys GLaDOS's morality core, causing her to once again become quite insane and begin flooding the entire building with neurotoxin. Thankfully, Shell destroys GLaDOS's other remaining cores, causing her to be destroyed, Her and Shell are exploded out of the building and into the car park of Aperture. Doug follows closely behind and sees Shell being dragged back inside by the party escort bot. Despite the heavy warnings and pleas from his companion cube, Doug reluctantly follows Shell back inside to save her, feeling responsible for her condition. He discovers Shell has been placed in the cryo chamber in the relaxation center. He also discovers that all of these cryo chambers are offline due to GLaDOS' explosion, knocking out the power grid, leaving Shell very vulnerable to death. He attempts to reach the controls, however without the advice and source of reason from his companion cube. Due to his antipsychotic pills, he is incapable of selecting the right paths and is subsequently shot in the leg by a turret, though not fatally. Upon regaining consciousness, he is right back into his psychosis, and his cube gives the advice of helping Shell by patching her chamber into the backup grid, placing her into stasis for an unspecified amount of time. Afterwards, he goes to sleep in a relaxation pod, and that's the last we hear of him. Following this is a long period of inactivity within Aperture, with nothing happening. No testing, no development, nothing. The only running systems are maintenance bots and personality cores. Aperture remained dilapidated and disarray for some unspecified amount of time, till Shell is awoken by a personality core called Wheatley, who insists he knows a way to escape Aperture Laboratories, which inadvertently results in the activation of GLaDOS, where the testing cycle begins once again. Wheatley helps Shell escape and sabotage GLaDOS' turrets, bombs and neurotoxin supply after a brief confrontation. Wheatley is placed in control of the entire facility, where he almost instantaneously becomes corrupted with power and smashes Shell into the remains of the old Aperture facility, as well as stuffing GLaDOS' consciousness into a potato battery. Shell then subsequently makes her way back to Wheatley, and after a brief battle and a portal journey to the moon, GLaDOS is put back in charge of Aperture, and as a kind of token of gratitude, allows Shell to leave Aperture. No more tricks, or trying to kill her, she just sends her back to the surface, with her own turret orchestra as a send-off. Straight into a wheat field, free, totally unaware of what's transpired in her time below the surface. And that's where the story closes, with a reunion and a literal door slam.